What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Football Last Call. I'm your host, Dylan Clemons. Here with me, like he is every week, Mike LaPlant. What's up, pal?
I feel like I'm with you, like, everywhere.
Yeah.
Am I your son?
We're together. We're together Friday nights doing the Wolfpack podcast. We're together doing the Sunday Social. Now the Last Call, man. If I'm going to be honest with you, I've had enough of you.
I mean, that's what you say about your son, so I feel like I was spot on with the son analogy.
Never, ever. But a crazy day of football. We might as well just jump right into it. The Sunday night game, Bears-Packers. Packers are leading 24-7. Bears cannot stop the run. Aaron Jones is absolutely blowing up. So Before we get started, though, just want you to remind you, please like and subscribe. Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel. Go on over and check out fantasysixpack.net/plans and check out our plans. Join our Discord. Ton of fun over there. We got award-winning rankings over there as well. All sorts of stuff. Direct access to our Fantasy Six Pack writers. But yeah, I think Mike, if you're ready, we could jump right into it.
Shoot us off, because I know you want to talk about this game.
First game we got here, the Dolphins come from behind victory, man. In the second half, they win 42-38 over the Ravens. Tua has the day of his career, 469 yards, 6 touchdowns. He did throw 2 picks, finished the day with 40 fantasy points. The running backs didn't really do a whole lot. Mostert led the team in carries and yards and finished with 10.9 fantasy points. It was the wide receivers, Mike, for the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, 11 catches for 190, 2 touchdowns, 42 fantasy points. Jalen Waddle, 11 catches, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns, 40 fantasy points, Mike. That's 2 wide receivers on the same team scoring 40 PPR fantasy points. Get out of here with that.
You want to know the only other time that's happened?
Right, it got to be never.
It hasn't.
That's I was going to say, absolutely insane, man. But even on the other side of it, Lamar Jackson was bananas today as well. Yeah, man. 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, added another one on the ground, plus 119 yards. He had 42 fantasy points. He hit Bateman on a bomb. Bateman had 4 catches for 108 and a touchdown. Andrews had a big day. 9 on 11 targets for 104 and a touchdown, 25 fantasy points. Mike, what was your biggest takeaway out of all that nonsense that just came out of my mouth? What's your biggest takeaway from that game?
Holy hell, gold pot fantasy value right there. I mean, at least on the Dolphin side of it. You're probably not going to get a whole hell of a lot of these games, but man, if you had these players in this game, you loved it. Biggest takeaway, though, is don't overreact on Tua and, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. This was expected when, they traded for him. You're not going to get a lot of games where both of them have 11 receptions for 150-plus yards, both having 2 touchdowns. But still, fantastic day.
Yeah, man, it really was. And, there was questions about Tua's deep ball, but he did not seem to have a problem today. He hit Tyreek Hill on a bomb that was beautiful. Might have even been 2. But we can go ahead and jump over to the next game. We have the Indianapolis Colts against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts were terrible, Mike. Absolutely terrible. Matt Ryan threw 3 interceptions. 195 yards, finished with 4 fantasy points. Jonathan Taylor, 9 for 54, 7 fantasy points. The only silver lining for this team was Ashton Dulin, 5 for 7 for 79 yards and 13 fantasy
If you can consider it a silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't happen if Pittman was there, but go on.
Right. Lawrence was good for the Jaguars, 235, 2 touchdowns, 18.5 fantasy points. He's really, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking on it, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the running backs. James Robinson was not efficient. That's the word I was looking for, Mike. Lawrence was efficient.
Inefficient.
Yeah, James Robinson was not efficient. He was inefficient. He was 23 rushing attempt for 64 yards and a touchdown. ETN, not good again. 8.3 fantasy points. Christian Kirk, we've been wanting him all offseason, man, and he's really doing it so far.
Paying off.
Yep, 6 receptions.
He's making us look smart.
Targets, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. Man, his draft capital was just a steal on him.
He's already smashing it.
And then Evan Ingram added 11.6 fantasy points. Mike, I bet your biggest takeaway here is going to be from the Jaguars because the Colts offense was non-existent in this game.
I mean, my biggest takeaway is from the Jags. I mean, the Colts will bounce back, but my thing is, Etienne, man, I'm a little afraid here of the workload going down the stretch. It does look like, Robinson is going to get majority of the rushing volume. And I mean, if they're going to be in games and winning games, is Etienne going to have the same value because he doesn't have the PPR value working in his favor then?
Yeah, man, for sure. I'm getting a little nervous too. They just really didn't need to use him in this game, in the passing game because they didn't get down. They pretty much dominated this game.
They didn't need him.
But as an ETN owner, I'm getting a little nervous. There's one more guy I'm more nervous about, but I will get into that later. Next game we got here, Patriots at the Steelers. Patriots pulled out the win 17-14. Mac Jones had an okay day, 252, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for 13 fantasy points. Damian Harris also found the end zone, finished with 16.7 fantasy points. He did go down holding his knee. Hopefully he's okay, Mike. I don't think we've heard any news on that, right?
I have not heard any news yet. No.
Sure. Okay. And then we actually had 2 pass catchers for the Patriots do something this week. Nelson Aguilar catching a bomb from Mac Jones. He caught all 6 of his targets for 110 and a touchdown, 23 fantasy points. Jacoby Myers also saw 13 targets, Mike. Caught 9 of them for 95 yards, 18.5 PPR points. Jumping over the Steelers, Mitch, kind of nonsense today, 10 fantasy points. Najee Harris, he was good in PPR because he caught 5 of his 6 targets, almost 14 fantasy points. Freiermuth was relevant only because he caught a touchdown, 12 fantasy points. Deontay Johnson caught 6 of his 10 targets for 57 yards. Mike, what's your takeaway here?
I like the Muth, man. He seems to be Mitch Trubisky's red zone target here. And, I mean, other than that, it seems like, my biggest takeaway from the Patriots is where the hell is Ramondre Stevenson? We saw Montgomery go on the IR. We'd figure he'd get a little bit more involved here, but non-existent. Leaving it looks like Damian Harris to kind of lead this backfield for the time being.
If he's healthy. Obviously, if Harris is banged up with that knee, then it's wheels up for Ramondre. But, of course, we never hope for injuries here.
No.
But, yeah, man, I'm with you on the Muth, man. Seeing 7 targets again, saw like 10 or 11 last week.
Caught a touchdown last week as well.
Yep. And so he's going to be the red zone target for Mitch, like you said, and I'm digging it. Next game, we got Panthers at the Giants. Panthers, man, another close game. They can't figure out how to win. They lose 19-16 to the Giants. Baker Mayfield, we were talking pre-show, Mike, here earlier. Both coaches were playing not to lose this game, and you're just going to know that just by the stats of the quarterbacks. Mayfield, 145 yards. Daniel Jones, 176 yards. They each had 13 fantasy points. CMC,
each had a touchdown, no interceptions.
Yep, exactly. CMC had 102 yards, like 125 total, actually. Finished with 16.8 fantasy points. DJ Moore saved his day, Mike, with a touchdown.
Salvaged. It's salvaged his day. It wasn't great.
Finished with 13 fantasy points. Barkley, after last week, he kind of slowed down a little bit, 72 yards on the ground, added 16.
Still love
receiving.
The workload, though.
Yep, 11.8 fantasy points. And the wide receivers didn't really do a whole lot. Shepard saw 10 targets, and Daniel Bellinger caught the lone touchdown.
The one thing I will say is that I told us, I believe it was was the one that told us that Kenny Galladay's locker was cleared out at the end of this game. So curious about what that means.
And somebody said he only played 1 snap, so maybe he quit before he got fired.
I need to do that to my hair.
What are you taking away from this, Mike? It's just the great workload for Saquon still there, which is awesome to see.
Well, I like the workload for CMC too. It increased a little bit here. We got 5 targets, instead of the measly, I think it was 2 last week. Got more rushing attempts as well. So I do like the workload increasing and staying there for Barkley. I am curious here of Sterling Shepard though, because of Kadarius Toney's injuries. I want to monitor him moving forward. See what maybe he can become a waiver wire darling.
I get that. Yep, I totally get that. Next game, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Saints. The Bucs figured out a way to win this game. Ugly game, man. They win 20-10. Speaking about ugly, that would be Tom Brady's stat line. 190 yards, 1 touchdown, only 9 fantasy points. Leonard Fournette wasn't great on the ground either, only 9 fantasy points. Mike Evans saw 4 targets in limited play because him and Marshawn Lattimore got ejected because, shocker, they absolutely can't stand each other.
Well, I mean, Mike Evans was just defending his quarterback, but I mean, what was there to defend besides words?
Yeah, man, I don't get it either. And then Perryman catches the touchdown. You're jumping over to the Saints. Winston, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. Jameis day. It was back to pre-LASIK Jameis. 10.5 fantasy points. Mark Ingram efficient on the ground, only 60 yards though. And then Mike Thomas for the second week catches another touchdown. Catches 6 of his 9 targets for 65 yards. Olave, Mike, the rookie Chris Olave out of Ohio State sees 13 targets for 80 yards at 11 fantasy points. I would ask you a question here, not just your biggest takeaway. Are we worried about Tampa Bay's offense, man? Because this is 2 clunkers in a row. I know we kind of expected that, them going against the Saints. Brady struggles against the Saints. What are you thinking here?
Well, I mean, thankfully we got the update, at least on the Sunday social show, that Jameis Winston did have the broken bones in his back when he was going through this. So, I mean, it could be attributed to that. Also, Alvin Kamara was not active today as well. So, I mean, we don't have, Kamara. We don't have a healthy Winston. We are playing a tough Buccaneers defense. So, I don't know, man. That one's a tough call. The one thing I will say this from JJ Zacharyson, I saw a tweet here. Chris Olave became the first rookie wide receiver to see 11 plus targets and only catch 5.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely something to monitor. Next game we got here, Washington Commanders at the Lions. Lions win 36-27. Good for them, man. But starting with Carson Wentz, attaboy. Carson Wentz, 337, 3 touchdowns, did throw 1 pick, all garbage time points for him.
Every little bit of it.
Fantasy points. Oh, yeah. Antonio Gibson struggled on the ground, did find the end zone to salvage his day, 12 fantasy points. Curtis Samuel again, man, seeing 9 targets, 78 yards and a touchdown. Also got a carry for 24 yards, 23 fantasy points. McLaurin was okay, 12 fantasy points. Dotson catches another touchdown, 16 fantasy points. Logan Thomas, we see him might be talking his way into a streaming tight end, possibly playing his way into a streaming tight end. 12.7 fantasy points. Mike, Jared Goff also has another decent day, 4 touchdowns, 26 fantasy points. Swift, he was on a pitch count. He had 5 carries for 56 yards. Caught 2 of his 5 targets for 31 yards, 1 touchdown, 16.7 fantasy points. The big news here, man, is Amon-Ra St. Brown see 12 targets once again, catching 2 touchdowns, 9 catches, 116. Also had 2 rushes for 68 yards, 39 fantasy points. Mike, this guy's the real deal. What's your takeaway here?
You said it. He's the real deal. This guy, elite production, elite target share. I mean, the Lions have found themselves the number 1 receiver in a steal, I believe, in the 4th round of last year.
Yeah, man, for real. He is so smooth as a route runner. He's got good hands.
He makes Jared Goff look really good.
Yes, he does, and they got the connection. The last game of the early games, we have the Jets pulling a late upset after getting an onside kick, after Corey Davis catching a bomb late as this game looks over. Jets pull the upset 31-30 over the Browns. Smoking Joe Flacco, man, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, 27 fantasy points. Breece Hall led this backfield with 7 carries for 50 yards. Did catch a touchdown through the air for 13 fantasy points. Carter was okay as well, 10 fantasy points. But Mike, big takeaway from the Jets here is Garrett Wilson and his 14 targets, caught 8 of them, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, 30 fantasy points. And then I said Corey Davis
want to know
as well.
I want to know how many of those 14 targets were red zone targets, because it feels like this man got 7 red zone targets.
Yes,
today, Garrett Wilson.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
It was nuts.
It'll be nice to see when that comes out how many he actually had. Jacoby Brissett, 229, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 43 yards on the ground, 16.5 fantasy points. So if you had to start him in a pinch, it wasn't absolutely atrocious. Nick Chubb's Found the end zone 3 times this week, Mike. We were talking about how Kareem Hunt seems to always vulture it. Not today, Zerg. And he added 87 yards as well to go along with those 3
And
touchdowns.
he needed those 3 touchdowns.
32 fantasy points. Yep. And Kareem Hunt had a quiet game, 9.5 fantasy points, Mike. But Amari Cooper, he comes alive here in his second game in Cleveland, catching 9 out of 10 targets for 101 and a touchdown for 25 fantasy points. Mike, is your biggest takeaway from this game Garrett Wilson and those red zone targets?
It's Garrett Wilson, and then it was also confirmation on Kareem Hunt, because we were all wondering, how it was going to be, if he was going to be more consistent in this offense, but it was that confirmation he was going to be inconsistent, just kind of like at least how I presumed. But yes, my biggest takeaway is Garrett Wilson and the fact that, Breece Hall, why is he not involved more?
Michael Carter. He's the heartbeat of the offense, man. That's Robert Sala's talking about.
That's still my question. That's my takeaway from it. Where is Breece Hall?
You trade up early in the second round to get Breece Hall, and you're pretty much splitting it 50-50. I'm curious. I haven't seen the snap counts yet, but I am curious to look into that and see what it looked like.
I'm wondering if it's a Joe Flacco thing, because he's played with Carter last year.
True. Yeah, it very well could be. He might want him on the field for pass blocking and stuff. You might be right. First of our late afternoon games, we got the Houston Texans at the Denver Broncos. Broncos win a 16-9 game. Just a
barn burner.
Just a slobber knocker here, guys. We'll get into the Broncos here in a second, but let's talk. Davis Mills, nothing here, guys. I don't even need to mention. Only seven fantasy points. It was good to see Dameon Pierce lead this backfield, though, with 15 carries for 69 yards, catching a pass, too. Only had 8.7 fantasy points, but nobody in this offense really did anything. Cooks, only 9.5 fantasy points. Nico Collins, 9.8.
If you listen to us about staying away from Bex Burkhead, you paid off today, guys.
Yes, that is a fact.
Do not chase old age production.
32 years old, Mike. Russell Wilson, ugly game for Russ, man. He had 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 12 fantasy points.
Jerry Jeudy did go down early, though.
Yes, which opened the door for Cortland Sutton going off. He caught 7 of his 11 targets, open all night, 122 yards, 19.7 fantasy points. Javonte Williams also led this backfield, 15 for 75 yards. Only 9.5 fantasy points, though. And Eric Saubert.
All those targets disappeared. That was what I was concerned.
Yes. Eric Saubert caught a touchdown. But, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and take this one. My biggest takeaway is Nathaniel Hackett has really struggled being a head coach throughout these first 2 games, man. I'm blanking on what happened, but there was just a couple times this week, just like last week, where it's
delay of games.
Dude, what are you doing? Yeah, it was. I just have no idea. He is really struggling, and it's causing this offense to fail and bog down. I don't know if he's what's causing it, but he's definitely not helping it. That's a fact.
No, it doesn't seem like it's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah, man.
Each time.
And Russ,
but hey, you get a win. You get a win though. That's what you focus on. It's an ugly win's a win. Oh, Aaron Jones just busting one. Woo!
They're lucky they were playing the Texans, though, and the Texans gave them a game. It's just their offense couldn't get out of their own way this week.
Santa Claus, Lovie Smith gifted him a win.
Yeah, Lovie, he plays so conservative, man. And yeah, I just saw the Aaron Jones play. This is getting ugly in a hurry, quick here, guys, on Sunday Night Football, unfortunately for me. But we got our next game, the Bengals at the Cowboys. Cooper Rush, man. 2-0 as a starter in his career, winning 20-17, starting with the Bengals. Burrow again, man. Offensive line is really struggling. We thought they were going to be better. They just have not gelled so far. He only had 199 yards, 1 touchdown. Want to say he was sacked 5 or 6 times.
6 times.
Yep, and had 14.5 fantasy points. Mixon, not great either, 11 fantasy points. Chase struggled a bit too. Still saw 9 targets, only 10.8 fantasy points, though. It was Higgins, Mike, out of this wide receiver core, coming off the concussion, catching 6 of his 10 targets for 71 yards and a touchdown, 19 fantasy points. Then jumping over to the Cowboys, Cooper Rush, like I said, he was fine. 235 yards, 1 touchdown. Zeke didn't do a whole lot, guys. 5.9 fantasy points. Maybe he's dusty. Maybe he's old. Maybe it's over. Everybody who's been tooting the horn of Tony Pollard all offseason feels vindicated today, man. 9 carries, 43 yards with a touchdown. 4 catches on 7 targets for 55 yards and 19.8 fantasy points. Mike, we saw CeeDee Lamb be a target monster again, 7 of 11 targets, 75 yards, 15 fantasy points. Noah Brown was who caught Cooper Rush's touchdown for 20 fantasy points. Mike, what's your takeaway out of this one? Besides the Bengals, the Super Bowl hangovers for real, and they are 0-2 to start the year, man. Ugh.
We didn't mention Dalton Schultz also went down with an injury in this game, which I think was the reason, at least in my opinion, why Tony Pollard got involved so much, because those were the two guys who were the safety blanket for Cooper Rush. I think it was Dalton Schultz and Tony Pollard. And once Schultz went down, Pollard became even more valuable. And that's probably my biggest takeaway is Tony Pollard seems to have the most value in this offense, even over CeeDee Lamb moving forward, it seems like.
It could be. I do like seeing CeeDee Lamb with all these targets still. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. But, that could come down here pretty soon. Fumble here, Mike. Bears football looks like.
I think so.
Oh, no. I lost my train of looks like A.J. Dillon. But I lost my train of thought now. Dang it.
That's all right.
No. Now I remember. CeeDee Lamb seen his 11 targets. Michael Gallup coming in a couple weeks, Mike. That might cut into his targets some. So that's just something to monitor. But can you take Noah Brown off the field with Michael Gallup coming back? Because him and Cooper Rush got some chemistry, and Noah Brown had a decent week last week as well. We shall see.
Yeah, they do have chemistry from last year.
Yep. Next game, Seahawks, 49ers. Seahawks get taken down, man. 27-7. Mike, I want to start here, though. Prayers up to Trey Lance. Unfortunately, his ankle was twisted the wrong way. It doesn't look good. Yeah, it sounds like it was broken, or was that reported?
Requires season-ending surgery.
Yes. So your quarterback, guys, is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo for the rest of the season. Like I said, prayers up to Trey Lance. It's whether what you think about him as an NFL quarterback, it sucks seeing somebody get injured like that. But we might as well start with the Niners. Garoppolo, 154 from when he came in the first half, 1 touchdown. He was fine, 16.5 fantasy points. Jeff Wilson did lead this backfield, Mike, 18 carries, 84 yards.
Just like I told you he would.
He did. But TDP sighting, Mike, 14 carries, was not great, though, only 33 yards. Deebo Samuel caught 5 of his 6 targets, 44 yards. Also added 4 rushes on the ground, 53 yards. So that rushing floor that he possesses, man's really saving him right now for fantasy purposes. And then you got Brandon Ayuk. Saw 8 targets. Love to see that. Caught 5 of them, 63 yards, 11.3 fantasy points. And Ross Dwelly caught the touchdown. And then the only person really to mention on the Seahawks was Tyler Lockett. Had a great day. He caught 9 of 11 targets for 19.7 fantasy points. DK struggled, dealing with an injury today. Only 7.5 fantasy points. Mike, what's your biggest takeaway here? Is it Jeff Wilson? Is it the wide receiver core? What do you think?
I definitely think it's Jeff Wilson and the running backs moving forward for honestly both of these groups. Because Rashad Penny, Kenneth Walker, they suck today. I know that they were down the entire time, but a lot of people drafted them. Your hero RB. So I'm monitoring that situation moving forward, and then I'm going to circle the wagon on Jeff Wilson, man. Hopefully he can stay healthy now because running backs in this San Francisco offense are valuable.
Yep. And next game here, the score was closer than this game. Rams win 31-27. Yeah, Marcus Mariota was in today. He threw 2 picks, 196, 2 touchdowns, 13.5 fantasy points. Cordero Patterson, 10 rushes, 41 yards. Mike, he really disappointed today, unfortunately, after that really solid game.
Only 1 target.
It was a tough matchup. Yep. Drake London caught 8 of his 12 targets for a touchdown. Great day for him, 22.6 fantasy points. He looks like the alpha in this offense. Hold on. Don't get me started on Kyle Pitts yet. Let me talk.
You started it.
Amadeus Zacchaeus, I think his name is.
Amadeus Zacchaeus.
Caught all 2 of his targets for 22 yards and a touchdown, 10 fantasy points. And then we got Kyle Pitts here, man, and I'm going to lose my mind even before getting to it.
Hey, Ross Dwelly scored more fantasy points than him this week.
3 targets, 19 yards for the second straight week, 3.9 fantasy
Eric
points.
Saubert scored
And
more fantasy points
you
than
know
him
what
this week.
that ignorant asshole of a coach said after the game, Mike? He said he has the wherewithal to say this isn't fantasy football. We're trying to win when asked about Kyle Pitts' usage. Newsflash, asshole. You're not winning. How about you get your first round talent, like the 4th overall pick? How about you get him the damn ball and maybe you get a win? I get it.
I
It's
feel
not
like this is coming
football.
from a personal point of view.
100%.
But yeah, understandable.
100%. You're getting. I thought I was getting great value of Kyle Pitts at the 3-4 turn, man, and it's just been complete and utter dog shit so far from him. And it has nothing to do with him. They're using him as an inline tight end. This
was our concerns.
I know, Mike. I don't understand. And then, like I said, that asshead of a coach, we're trying to win. It's not working.
I mean, you can't say he's not trying to win, though. Yes,
I understand. But get your best player the ball.
I mean, it looked like that was Drake London today. But
Drake London's sexy, man. He does look good. Jumping over people and stuff. Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you're seeing how he feels about
it. You could say that, Dean. But yeah, that was my rant on that.
One tight end, Daniel Bellinger, also scored 4 points today.
Yeah, now you're just rubbed it in. Stafford had an okay day, 3 touchdowns, but threw 2 picks, still 20 fantasy points. Darrell Henderson led the backfield, man, but we saw a lot more Cam Akers. Henderson found the end zone. Salvaged his day, 10.7 fantasy points. Go ahead.
I was going to say Akers actually led the backfield technically.
Yeah, 15 carries. Yep. I'm curious to see the snap count on this as well. Akers wasn't very efficient, though, 15 for 44. Also added 18 yards through the air. But Cooper Kupp did Cooper Kupp things, 14 targets, 11 catches, 108, 2 touchdowns. And, Mike, we did see a bounce back from Allen Robinson. Only 5 targets, but did find the end zone for 15 fantasy points. And let's talk about Tyler Higbee. That's close to 10 targets, back-to-back games, 71 yards, 14 fantasy points. Mike, what's your big takeaway here?
Allen Robinson probably should have had 2 touchdowns if it wasn't for that injury timeout that was called previous. My biggest takeaway is this looks like it's gonna be fucking hell trying to determine how this backfield's gonna work out for the Rams moving forward. And obviously, like you said, get Kyle Pitts involved more.
Oh, yeah. I agree. What more can we say, man? Well, it looks like the Bears just got stopped on 3rd down on a
take those
play.
2 targets to Zacchaeus and put him to Pitts.
And then this last game, finishing up here, you guys almost got to see me rant about 2 players here because Kyler Murray was absolutely crap for the first 3 quarters of this game too, but he leads a comeback for the Cardinals in overtime. Cardinals beat the Raiders 29-23. Murray finished with 23 fantasy points, 1 touchdown through the air, 1 on the ground as well. Bears just kicked a field goal, Mike, 24-10. Then we got Darrell Williams. James Conner went down with an injury. Darrell Williams, 8 rushes, 59 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 catches, 3 yards through the air, 14.2 fantasy points. Then we got Marquise Brown catching 6 of his 11 targets, 68 yards, 12.8 fantasy points. And then we got Greg the Deutschman Dortch. 4 catches on 4 targets, 55 yards, catches a touchdown back-to-back weeks. Mike, 15.5 fantasy points. And we have Zach Ertz, 11 targets, 75 yards, 15.5 fantasy points as well. Then go look it over on the Raiders side of it. Derek Carr, fish a day, 2 touchdowns, 18.9 fantasy points. Jacobs saw 19 carries, 20 touches in all, 9 fantasy points. Adams, quiet day, man. Only 7 targets, 2
Still
catches.
Got a touchdown.
Yep, did catch a touchdown to salvage his day, only 9.2 fantasy points. Renfro, man, he got the targets back, Mike. He got 10 of them, caught 7 of them for 58 yards. He did have a costly fumble.
I was going to say, he got the targets back, but he lost the ball in the process.
Yep. Yeah, that was a nightmare. That's how they lost. He fumbled, and it was a scoop and score by Byron Murphy, and Isaiah Simmons forced the fumble.
I did see that update that Hunter Renfrow might be concussed after.
No.
Well.
Oh, no. That's a bad time there. And then we got Darrell Waller catching 6 of his 8 targets for 50 yards and finding the end zone, 17 fantasy points. So he did not disappoint today. The only top 4 tight end to disappoint, Mike, was my guy Kyle Pitts, because his coach is trying to win. He doesn't care. I mean, he's just trying to win. What's your biggest takeaway here from this Raiders-Cardinals game?
That you hate Arthur Smith. My biggest takeaway is, do a little digging into this James Conner injury, because Darrell Williams could be a great waiver wire ad in the future weeks in this offense with how much they use the running backs in the red zone and in the passing game.
If Conner is missing any time, Mike, Darrell Williams is probably the number 1 waiver guy, because just the touchdown upside he sees. James Conner saw 16 touchdowns last year or something wild like that. So Arizona just kind of likes to use one guy. So, yeah, I agree with you. But, yeah, that pretty much wraps it up, man.
And the Raiders should probably use Devontae Adams more if they want to win.
Yes, I agree. We got a 24-10 Packers lead over the Bears. Boo. We got about 5 minutes left to go in the third quarter.
We're gonna make a. Oh man, you're lucky. I don't like making bets against teams. For the teams I root for, because it's just bad juju. Otherwise, man, you'd be losing so many of these bets.
Whatever. But yeah, we're gonna wrap it up, guys. Like I said at the beginning of the show, please like this video on YouTube. Please subscribe
if you like listening to us.
Yes,
I know Dylan doesn't like listening to me, but I like listening to him.
Definitely not. I'm sick of this guy over here. Go check out fantasy6pack.net/plans so you can join that Discord, man. We talked all day through the games. It was just an absolute blast today. So you can catch us on our podcast Friday nights. Check out all the other great content that Fantasy Six Pack has
pretty much every day of the week.
Channel. Yep, and the website. So we'll be back next week for more football, Mike. But until then, he's Mike LaPlant. Go ahead.
2 Monday night games.
Yes, sir. Let's go. But for Mike LaPlant, I'm Dylan Clemons. Talk to you guys next week.